Hello and welcome back to a new video. Today we will have a look at 5 things I wish I knew when I started skiing about 15 years ago. Number 5. Accept waxing as a part of the game. A basic prerequisite in the sport of cross-country skiing is to be able to develop technical skills in training. This is especially relevant in the classic style, where good grip is necessary to be able to ski properly. Applying the ideal grip wax in all kinds of weather conditions can be a challenge. Becoming exceptional is a long-term and challenging project, but learning a minimum is something you must do if you have ambitions. I know athletes who've never bothered to learn this. The consequence is that they often have slippery skis in training, which is a problem. If you do too many sessions with poorly prepared classic skis, you simply won't have the opportunity to become a skilled classic technician. You should rather accept this as a part of the game. By the way, another method that's underrated is simply to ski without your poles in training, and implementing it several times a week will certainly fix many of the holes in your technique and help you to level up your classic game in particular. Number 4. You can't buy success. First of all, I just want to make it clear that certain types of equipment are definitely important. Without fast skis, it's impossible to perform at the top level. This is not meant to moralize either. If you have a lot of money and you want to spend it on stuff like this, do it as much as you want. But what I want to emphasize is that there is still a lot of unnecessary use of money in this sport that doesn't necessarily lead to better results. I'll give you some examples. A lot of people my age, myself included, spend a huge amount of money on Oakleys. It's great to have sunglasses, but you don't need a collection of 10 or 15. Example number 2, training camps. In the skiing community, an enormous amount of money is spent on moving from place to place during the entire preparation period from May to November, but the majority of locations are more than good enough for training. You should rather choose to work harder for free at the place you currently are. Not to get into the debate of whether altitude training works or not, but anyone who has read scientific articles on the subject can agree that the effect of altitude training is not huge, and you need to stay there for an extended period of time to achieve this marginal effect. Money-wise, there is a huge cost going to these places. Additionally, it's disadvantageous to expose yourself to lots of bacteria and viruses when traveling. Spending too much time on planes and trains is not only going to make you sick more often, but it also implies a stress that is not beneficial when every day counts in the pursuit of success. It's better to stay in one place and achieve consistency, which will save you a lot of money instead of thinking, oh, I'm going to go to the Alps for 1 month straight. I'm going to eat 200 pizzas, use 500 lactate strips, and train exclusively in Zone 1 to Zone 3. And when I return back home, I will be an unstoppable machine who's going to destroy everyone. I'm sorry to say, it's not going to happen, guys. The Norwegian national team even had some of their most successful seasons ever, during a period where they did 0 altitude training. Heat training can be a free alternative you can do, without any travel involved either. Another example, ski poles. Poles are quite expensive, but they're not that important as long as they're of a certain quality. You don't need the most expensive ones to ski fast. Finding poles in the correct length is actually much more important than the poles itself. If you have a limited budget, this is not where you should spend your money. The development of ski boots over the last decade hasn't really been that significant either, and the difference between the best boots from 2015 and 2025 is marginal. Like if you measure the actual speed difference, if there is any at all. Every time you hear about sensational equipment news, be extra skeptical because there are always financial motives behind. So that's what I mean by you can't buy success. Becoming a fast skier is not like purchasing an item where you get what you pay for. It's about what you put in, you get out, but in a different sense. The training and dedication you put in is what's going to make you progress, not the amount of money you spend.
Så du har tatt med deg kanskje den største skiposen jeg har sett for å gå en slalombakke, men tror du finner det du trenger oppi her?
Kanskje jeg har på skjønnsski I hvert fall.
Her har vi faktisk 7 par ski, pluss 4 par staver. Du leker ikke butikk du heller.
Jeg skal møte verdens råeste skiutøvere her.
Og dette hjelper deg med det, tror du? De skia kommer til å ligge her.
Number 3. It's all in the head. What I want to emphasize in this chapter is the importance of mental skills, which is underrated by many. You can divide mental skills into 2 types, what I call training mentality and competition mentality. Training mentality is about your ability to stay focused in your daily life, and the other is about your ability to perform at your best at the most critical moment. Both are important. Thomas Alsgaard claimed in his biography that being able to get into his optimal mental mode could make as much as 1 minute difference in a distance race, and he compared it to the fact that many people obsess over what he called irrelevant technical details, but they underestimate the power of the mind. Learning how to push yourself in training takes time. One of the reasons I've argued for implementing more high-intensity training is not only because there are huge benefits to raising the ceiling, but it's also rooted in my philosophy that it's impossible to develop the ability to break mental barriers and manage pain if you never experience any form of discomfort in training. Have you heard the quote, "Obsession is a real superpower"? What is meant by this is that the person who's going to improve the most is the one who is obsessed with what they do, the person who is more methodical than you, the person who is passionate, the person who is willing to commit. It's in the everyday life results are decided. I've touched on this in previous videos, where I said that the idea of being lazy throughout the entire summer and fall for your shape to arrive at the perfect moment in the wintertime is the single stupidest idea I've ever heard. You need to have a continuous progression every damn week year-round, also during competition season in spring, to unlock your true potential. It's also about the whole picture over longer periods. Daily quality work, combined with long-term consistency over years. To be clear, if you don't have the genetics, you won't become a world champion no matter how obsessed you are. But what we are talking about here is to bring out your greatest potential performance. After a disappointing season in 2010, Sunby completely turned around and started his journey of meticulous work. One of the main changes was to contact a sports psychologist who made him realize he had a long way to go when it came to dedication. This man managed to change Sunby's mental approach in both training and competition. What he achieved in the following years was a result of him changing attitudes, habits, and daily routines. He utilized the power of obsession to the fullest. This is what I mean when I say there is so much in the head. To be able to bring out your absolute best, you also need to have a champion mindset where you really commit and do everything right in your daily life on the road to success.
Beinhardt arbeid funker ganske greit, da.
Number 2. Specificity is the key. There are a lot of different training philosophies in the endurance sports world. One of the concepts I was brought up to believe at a very young age was, whatever you do, you get better at. This is something I think we can all accept, and something that can be confirmed with basically any amount of data you get in any field. You only have a certain amount of total energy available. If you spread it around everywhere, you will have great general development. If you specialize, the rate you can progress is much faster. Still, throughout my entire life, I have heard lots of misguided ideas that really have been counterproductive and held many people back from development. One thing I tend to observe about some people who are almost overeducated is that they often get lost in theory that doesn't necessarily correspond to reality. What do I mean by that? Like, for instance, as a cross-country skier, you're approaching this challenge as an athlete who wants to do well at one thing. Let's say your main goal is a 10-kilometer skate race. How should you train? A person without physiological knowledge would think logical and say, you go out and train for the exact thing you want to improve. You simply do high-intensity skating in a similar course as you meet in competition, and you participate in similar competitions. Some of the theoreticians I have met, on the other hand, say, no, you shouldn't try to mimic the competition. You should rather train for the physiological attributes the competition requires. If you do some sessions on the indoor rower, some mountain biking, some classic, some swimming, etc., you can get better results through a more versatile approach. Who should you listen to? Both have good arguments, but after all the studies I've read on cross-training and my practical experience, I would have to agree with the person with the specialization philosophy. Sports performance is complex. There are so many known and unknown factors that determine your performance, and specificity will apply the greatest stimulus on most of these factors, like neurological adaptations, technique, utilization rate, VO2 kinetics, biochemical efficiency, anaerobic capacity, descending skills, tactical skills, development of pacing strategies, and other factors we aren't necessarily aware of. Not all adaptations are transferable from sport to sport. In the practical world, being well-rounded doesn't really transfer to the same degree as it might in theory. I have many experiences throughout my 15 years in the sport. I bought an indoor rower and did many hours of low-intensity work. It made no difference whatsoever. Another year, I tried doing only running for a couple of months. I got slightly more powerful in the diagonal stride, but my double poling was a total disaster, and my skating got significantly worse. You can't somehow avoid your main goal and just train for general cardiovascular fitness through other sports and believe that's going to be enough to prepare you for what you need. Methods like uphill running with poles or high-intensity cycling can help because it can raise your aerobic capacity, but it should always come as supplemental work and not as a replacement for roller skiing. The principle of specificity is also about how you train in your sport. In cross-country skiing, you compete in a terrain with a constant switch between uphill and downhill. This is what you want to be good at. Do not make the mistake of doing all your key sessions throughout the entire summer and autumn, either on flat roads or only uphill. Ideally, you need to train specifically in a roller ski track. It's also about the choice of training intensity. Competitions are all-out and often quite short in duration. It's therefore logical to do some all-out training where you get in time above 90% of your VO2 max and challenge your anaerobic engine, and frequently taking part in tough competitions as well. Some people say competition is the best way of training, and there is much truth to this quote. You get the point I'm trying to make? You need to think specificity and accuracy in all aspects of your training, and it's really as simple as, whatever you do, you get better at. If you're working on something that's too far off from what you need in competitions, it won't be transferable. It's that simple.
Everything that you need to know, you can learn by watching nature. And so we came up with this idea, Way of the Giant Pumpkin. And I don't know if any of your subscribers are farmers, but basically a pumpkin plant has many pumpkins on the vine. But if you want to grow a giant pumpkin, if you want to win that prize at the county fair, you're going to have to get rid of all the other pumpkins on the vine and just focus on one.
The number one thing I wish I knew when I started skiing: do not listen to guys who are telling you to train at 1 kilometer per hour. Ever since I started skiing, I've been told that training at an extremely low speed during low-intensity training is essential for success in the sport. In my country, most athletes use a 5-part heart rate-based intensity scale, where Zone 1 is from 55 or 60 to 72% of maximum heart rate, while Zone 2 is from 72 to 82%. The narrative many people are told is that Zone 1 is extremely safe, and it is through high volume in Zone 1 you get the best low-intensity training effect, while Zone 2 is dangerous and a so-called gray zone area that will make you overtrained. Low-intensity training can primarily improve the two factors: 1, muscular endurance, and 2, the cost of travel. You need to raise the intensity to a certain level to challenge your local musculature to adapt, and the local stimulus by moving at around 55 to 60% of max heart rate will not be anywhere near sufficient. The same goes for the development of the work economy. In cross-country skiing, your technique changes according to the speed. For low-intensity training to work, the technique needs to be close enough to what you do in competitions. At 10 kilometers per hour, the entire movement pattern will be different versus at 18 kilometers per hour. At certain speeds, it will simply be impossible to move technically efficient, and it won't transfer to competitions. You have to do low-intensity training, but there certainly exists a lower limit for how slow you can go and still achieve adaptations, and there are many skiers who go below, and this threshold seems to be higher than one traditionally would have thought. During my first years as a skier, I never did any super slow training whatsoever. A few men in the club told me, "Boy, you only have one gear. You're only going fast." To become successful in this sport, you need to learn how to train slow. My first years were super successful, and the results were amazing, but I'll tell you, after enough of their nagging and long time convincing, I started listening to them, and can you guess what happened? That's exactly when I got slower. During my 15 years of experience, I've tried back and forth, and the results I describe have been a consistent and recurring experience over the course of the entire period. Every time I move super slow, I get slower. Every time I move slightly faster, I get faster. Seems logical, right? The trend over the last few years in sports like running and cycling has also been to simply train when you train. And some skiers also say the same.
Jeg har trent ganske mye tøffe langturer, veldig mye tøffe langturer, så ser på treningsbøker, for jeg var ganske ærlig når jeg førte opp I2. Og jeg har også vært på lag med Simen Østensen, Martin Sundby. Vi har trent mye harde langturer, og vi sitter jo på ganske bra resultat, vi jo, selv om vi ikke har vært så mye kanskje I1-skalaen.
Sist sommer så begynte jeg å pushe grensene litt på den rolige treningen. Opplevde veldig stor effekt på terskelen av det. Jeg trente mindre terskel enn jeg har gjort på veldig mange år, men terskelen ble samtidig kom på et helt nytt nivå av å gå litt tøffere på rolig.
This idea that there exists a so-called magic threshold just around the 72% of max heart rate mark. Like, if you go 2 heartbeats past that line, you will get 3 times longer recovery time and get overtrained is complete nonsense. Technique should dictate the heart rate and not the other way around. Moving too slow will also cause you to train the wrong parts of your muscles and tendons because you're using different parts of those structures at different speeds. To take the risk that 500 of the hours you put in a year will have no effect at all is an unnecessary mistake you should avoid. I have had this discussion with some ski mates my age, and most of us agree that especially our generation has wasted an enormous amount of time in the woods because of the misinformation we were told when we were younger, which is quite frustrating to think about, really.
Mange timer som kastet bort I skog og mark I Norge.
Do not make the same mistake as we did. Low-intensity training is going to take up a large part of your total training, so you have to do it properly, and a lower heart rate doesn't always equal better quality. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.